The map is not the territory. A reflection on consciousness and the maps of meaning. For a long time, humanity has tried to understand something that feels far larger than the ordinary mind can easily hold. The depth of consciousness, the mystery of existence, the feeling that life is somehow more vast than the small story we usually live inside. When human beings encounter something that immense, the mind naturally does what it has always done. It creates maps. Maps give the mind something it can hold. They draw lines. They give names. They create directions. Suddenly, the unknown becomes navigable. Think about a map of the world. On the page, you see colored shapes for countries, lines for roads, blue threads for rivers. Everything looks organized and understandable. But everyone knows something very simple. The map is not the world. The mountains are not triangles. The rivers are not blue lines. The forests are not green patches. The map is simply a representation, a way of helping the mind relate to something far larger than the paper could ever contain. Without maps, we would struggle to navigate. But no one mistakes the map for the territory. And in many ways, humanity has done something very similar in its search to understand consciousness. Across centuries, people have sensed that life holds a depth far beyond what the ordinary mind perceives. Moments of stillness, moments of profound love, moments when the boundaries of the self soften and something vast seems to open. When those moments appear, the mind tries to understand them, and so it begins drawing maps. Some traditions spoke of angels, some spoke of spirit guides, some described higher dimensions or ascending levels of consciousness. Others imagined enlightened beings existing somewhere above humanity. These maps helped people approach experiences that felt immense and mysterious. They gave form to something the mind could not easily describe. But what if those maps were never meant to be the final description of reality? What if they were simply the mind's way of translating encounters with something much larger than it could easily comprehend? Because there is another possibility. What if the angels, the guides, the higher beings, the expanded states people speak about, are not actually separate from us at all? What if they are reflections, symbolic ways the human mind has learned to recognize the deeper capacities of consciousness itself? Think again about the map. A map draws boundaries and shapes so the mind can understand the landscape. But the landscape itself is continuous. The mountains are not separate from the earth. The rivers are not separate from the land. The lines on the map exist only so we can see what was always connected. In the same way, the spiritual maps humanity has created may have drawn lines within consciousness so the mind could begin to recognize its own depth. The compassion people attributed to angels, the wisdom people attributed to guides, the expanded clarity people associated with higher dimensions may not belong to something outside of us. They may be reflections of what consciousness itself is capable of when it opens more fully. Not a separate hierarchy above us, but deeper expressions of the same field of being that is present right now. Human beings imagined them as higher because the experiences felt more expansive than ordinary identity. More love, more clarity, more peace. But expansion does not necessarily mean separation. A wave may rise higher than another wave, yet both are still water. In the same way, the expanded states people have described for centuries may simply be consciousness revealing more of its own nature. Not something outside of us, something within the same field of being that our lives are already unfolding within. And when this begins to be recognized, something profound starts to shift. The sense of distance dissolves. The feeling that we must climb towards something greater softens. Because what we imagined as beyond us may have always been the deeper dimension of what we already are. The love we attributed to angels, the clarity we attributed to higher beings, the wisdom we imagined in distant realms. These may not be qualities that belong somewhere else. They may be reflections of the deeper capacities of consciousness itself. Capacities that become visible when the mind stops seeing itself as separate from the vastness it is trying to reach.